looking for somebody most likely to reach their ceiling out of this class, it might be Dawson Merritt, because the way he carries himself, the way he prepares, all of those things, they aren't like a 17, 18-year-old kid. They're like a kid who's a lot older and more mature than that.
Yeah, and when we saw him again, a couple episodes here on this very show, we talked about watching him at the Mill Valley Team 7-on-7 camp, and he looks night and day from when we saw him last fall.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
Hello, and welcome to the Verbal Commitment Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network, brought to you by Home Field Apparel. I'm Kevin Flaherty, and I'm here with Ryan Wallace, as always, from GoPowerCat.com and 24/7 Sports, to talk about the world of local recruiting, from Kansas City prospects to the college classes at Kansas State, and Missouri. As always, if you like what you're hearing, subscribe, hit that like button, or leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts, like Apple or Spotify. Ryan, high school season is coming up pretty quickly here, which means we get to get back on the road and scout here pretty quickly. With all of that in mind, yes, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Can you tell? I'm excited. Football season is thoroughly in the air now. I mean, Kevin, I'm knee deep into trying to blueprint our Friday nights, right? It takes some research, So when it starts getting to the point of like jamboree time, which we're very close on the Show Me State side, that's when you know stuff is really getting good. So I'm excited about today's episode. But real quick before high school, I wanted to chat with you just real quick for the Jayhawks out there. You have been an everyday participant at Landslide Folds camps. How are the Jayhawks looking? What's caught your eye?
Yeah, you make it sound like I'm out there running sprints or something, which thank goodness, I haven't been. But no, I mean, Kansas looks really good. I think, from a physical standpoint, they look like what you want, a Big 12 title contender to look like. As we talk about so often, though, the Big 12 is always decided by close games, right? Every single year you can go back and say, hey, you had this many one-score losses. That's why you didn't get where you wanted to get, or you had this many one-score wins, and that's why you had the season you were hoping to have. I think what K-State had, 4 one-score losses last year.
Yeah,
off the top of my head. So yeah, I mean, you think about that. You reverse a couple of those, you're in the Big 12 title game and having a chance to win 2 conference titles in a row. And so I think Kansas has the pieces. Jalen Daniels looks great running around. He's a guy that plays football with a lot of torque, the way that he throws the ball, the way that he moves. So if there were lingering ill effects from that back injury, I feel like you would have seen them right now with the way that he's been out there. And you haven't seen that. So that's pretty positive. What have you seen and or heard from the K-State side of things as far as King goes so far?
Yeah, I wrote a little piece on what would have been Thursday at GoPowerCat.com, which is always fun, about kind of rewriting the narratives, because whether it's us in the media or fans, you always kind of have expectations for certain players. Maybe you're writing somebody off because of guys that have been brought in. Maybe your expectations are super high for a newcomer. And then fall camp hits, you start talking to players and coaches. You see it, small snippets, right, of practice. And clarity hits, and you start to go, maybe I was wrong about some of that. And so I think the biggest takeaway within that article for me was, again, a guy from Kansas, or at least junior college in Kansas, at Hutchinson Community College. We all remember how good Terry Kirksky was.
Yes.
And K-State ends up getting him. He comes in last year at the linebacker spot, and, the game was quick for him. He needed things to slow down. He had some nagging injuries. Again, there was a lot of stuff going on transitionally in his mind, right? The mental part of it all needed to really come together. Kevin, he's fighting tooth and nail right now, where he was a guy that I had already cast off for this season. And it sounds like he's had one of the brightest camps on either side of the ball, to the point where, if he's not going to get some snaps in the rotation at Mike, linebacker behind a guy like Austin Romaine this year, there's talk about maybe even putting him in the mix at the weak side linebacker to spell Austin Moore. So he's gone from a guy that I didn't anticipate seeing hardly at all on Saturdays this year to being right there in the thick of it for a 2 deep spot.
It's been so cool to see so many local guys thriving, and guys that we liked a lot through the recruiting process. We both loved Devin Neal. We said when he was in high school, I think we said he's going to be an ambassador for the KU program, not just with his talent, but the way that he was personally. We loved Avery Johnson. We loved Jacob Parrish as more of a sleeper type guy that was really good. On the Kansas City side, Trevor Cardell got some praise today as a guy that's standing out. I know both of us really liked him. Obviously, Luke Grimm doing really well. Damian Alalio getting a lot of praise. And so it's great to see all these local guys kind of thriving in these camps. And
some people give Devin Neal praise. Not everybody. not
ESPN. Not ESPN. We're not going to go there because that could be its own episode. But
I'll get just as heated as you about that one.
Yeah. I thought it was silly is the wrong word, because those lists are hard to do. But Ryan, if we're ranking Jayhawks, leave out the rest of the country, because 2 Jayhawks made the list. I probably would have ranked Devin Neal number 1 from a Jayhawks standpoint. And so for him to not make that list was a little bit of a shock for sure. I think he made the top 50 on CBS's list that they did in the spring. So differing of opinions there.
But again, real quick to end that, Lance Leipold's got to love that. Devin Neal's got to love that, because that's locker room material for the whole year.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I would make sure that was plastered up there. If Devin didn't do it, I would have somebody do it for him to put that in there. Not that he needs the motivation, but it's certainly there. Arguably our favorite part of this job, and for those watching on YouTube, you saw Ryan celebrating the start of the season earlier, pumping his fists, is getting out to scout the players, and we get a chance to see them in such a variety of settings. We go to games, we see them in 7-on-7s, workouts. Sometimes we just pop by the school and talk to them, and get to know them personally a little bit that way. We talk to all kinds of coaches, from college coaches to their high school coaches to opposing coaches. And Ryan, I feel like that gives us a pretty good handle on these players and kind of what they're capable of, from not just an athletic standpoint, but the types of people they are, how coachable they are, all of those different things. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but we've talked a lot together about how we kind of grade players. And I think for both of us, it's not just upside, but also the likelihood that player hits that upside. And with that in mind, we went ahead and put together sort of our consensus list of the top 10 local players for 2025 at this point. This is a look at players both on the Kansas side and in Kansas City. We tried to stay in the region. On the Kansas side, we tried to stay pretty close to Kansas City as well.
Sure. Yeah.
So, I will mention Lincoln Cura a little bit, because I think Lincoln Cura and the guy that we listed number 1 on this list are kind of 1A, 1B in the state of Kansas at this point. Ryan, the guy that we picked at number 1, Mill Valley's Jaden Woods, a Penn State commitment. What do you like about Jaden?
Well, I mean, to me, he's been, Lincoln has had a rise, as we've gotten to know him, become more familiar with his game, because, word from that far west doesn't travel all the way this far east to the Kansas City Metro that quickly. So it took us a little bit of time to kind of get to know Lincoln. That said, we were pretty early on him. But Jaden has always been there. I mean, Jaden has been a guy from the moment he was like a freshman at Mill Valley. We've known a lot about him, and he's consistently lived up to the billing. And I think one of the reasons why a lot of the recruiting industry isn't as high as we are on Jaden is simply because they haven't had a chance to see him like you and I have. And by see him, I mean, we've seen him in 7-on-7 at multiple positions. We've seen him in, I think you might have seen him in like combine settings. And if we haven't seen him in combine settings, we've seen videos from personal trainers. We've seen videos from the weight room and the quote strength staff, if you will, at Mill Valley. And then we've seen him for 3 years now on the field under Friday Night Lights.
Multiple games a year.
Yeah.
I feel like.
And he consistently delivers. And from an athletic standpoint, he doesn't get near as much credit for the type of athlete that he is. We're talking a kid that's 6'3", 240 pounds, lean, but very long. And I think that's the part. He gets knocked a lot as a tweener of like, is he an edge? Is he an outside linebacker? If you saw him in person, it wouldn't matter because he's got the athleticism to cover, but also has the length and I think the power and acceleration that will throw off an offensive tackle when you just have him pursuit of the ball. To me, like you said, if Lincoln Cures one, then Jaden is no less than 1B, if not 2 in our eyes. And again, the recruiting industry is going to differ from us. But again, when we're looking just in the metro, for you and I, it was really a no-brainer that Jaden would have our top spot.
Yeah, you were talking about the length. He's measured with the 6'9" wingspan. He's a guy that his personal trainers had posted videos of him with a 40-inch vertical. And when you look at his broad jump numbers at Mill Valley and things like that, the explosiveness off the charts. And this is a guy that right now wins with strength and motor, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you look at those different things, I think, Jaden has a chance to be really, really good. He's got the work ethic, he's got the motor and the different things you want. He's so coachable. I think all of those things show not just a really high ceiling, but also somebody that is very likely to hit that ceiling. Moving to number 2, Dawson Merritt at Blue Valley is a guy that we're both very familiar with as well. Son of Dave Merritt, chief secondary coach. Ryan, this is a guy that we've talked about. If you're looking for somebody most likely to reach their ceiling out of this class, it might be Dawson Merritt because the way he carries himself, the way he prepares, all of those things, they aren't like a 17, 18-year-old kid. They're like a kid who's a lot older and more mature than that.
Yeah, and when we saw him again, a couple episodes here on this very show, we talked about watching him at the Mill Valley team 7-on-7 camp, and he looks night and day from when we saw him last fall. Listed right now probably at north of 210, maybe closing in on 215. And so, yeah, there's a reason why Alabama was on him from the get-go, and that was just because of the makeup, right? Yep. Now you're physically seeing him develop to look more like an Alabama linebacker. He's a kid that he's the prototypical outside linebacker of what they want moving forward in today's day and age in defense in terms of a guy that is a hybrid, but a hybrid in the sense of like, he has no qualms like dropping back in coverage, but he also will put his nose in and be a run stopper between the tackles too. But like you said, I think the reason why we're so confident on Dawson is, maybe even in this aspect more so than Jaden, the transition for him positionally will take no time at all because he's basically doing that right now at Blue Valley High School. Jaden, Penn State, there might be some flexibility with Dawson. I think for him, it's just going to be kind of maybe adjusting to the game, adjusting to the college, mindset of any program, right? Getting in that regimen and the demands that come with being at Alabama and in the SEC. But after that, I think he's a guy that's gonna shock some folks because I think people see Kansas City kid going to Alabama. Well, the speed is going to get to him, or he'll struggle with this. He might redshirt out of the gate, but I have a sense that he's not going to take long seeing the field, even if it's in the special teams capacity. He's too, like you said, he's too mature, too bright to not pick stuff up, and we already know he's physically gifted enough to be on the field.
Yeah, when we talk to these players, one of the things that we talk to them a lot about is kind of their motivations when picking certain schools. And I thought the way he approached his recruitment, the way that he looked at, hey, how am I going to fit into a specific team system? can I see myself out there playing this role? I thought was a really mature way to look at it. Number 3, and what would be an upset to, I think, those in the recruiting industry, we love this guy. Don't think that this is us knocking him at all. Andrew Babalola at Blue Valley Northwest. Ryan, obviously a first off the bus guy in terms of the way he looks. He's a smart kid. He's a great kid. I think with Andrew, at least for me, when we were stacking him up against some of these other guys, we have seen so much of Andrew over the last year or so. We've seen him in settings where he was really, kind of first learning about the position and maybe struggled in some of those situations. We've seen what it looks like when it looks right, when he does the things right and has that really positive rep. I just think to put him up higher than this, I want to see him be that guy on a more consistent basis. And when you look at him, when I think about a 5-star recruit, I think about guys that are not just freaks athletically, but also are the guys that are so easy to tell when you watch them play football, say, that's the guy right there. He's out there killing everybody.
Right.
With Andrew Babalola, he could be that guy this year, and he could absolutely move up this list. He could be number 1 on this list. I just think for where I'm at personally, and I'd like you to give your thoughts, but for me, I just like to see that a little bit more consistently from him before we put him up there in that category.
Yeah, I agree. If you're ranking on potential, right, and a lot of the recruiting industry now is on ceiling, right, you want to kind of be ahead of the curve. You're trying to look further down the line. And then there's no question that Andrew Babalola would be the number 1 guy. But like you said earlier, you and I are big on kind of finding the happy medium. We're going to recognize your ceiling, but we're also going to recognize the floor. And so for me, his floor maybe just isn't quite as sturdy, right? Or isn't quite as high as where the other guys are playing at right now when you compare him to like a Dawson Merritt or a Jaden Woods. And one opportunity that I had that was very unique that a lot of folks, I don't know if anybody's had this opportunity is, and first off, let me say this, credit to Andrew Babalola because he's doing all the right things.
Yes, he is.
And one of those things is getting with the right trainers in terms of teaching him the fundamentals. I will come on here night and day and praise, if you're a lineman, seek out Chris Gomez in the Kansas City Metro, because I think what he's doing in terms of developing offensive linemen, second to none. So Babs is working with Chris Gomez, but knowing Chris a little bit, I had an opportunity to go out, I think it was about a year ago, late last summer, and got a chance to see Andrew Babalola. And there was this kid from Nixa named Jackson Cantwell that happened to drive up from Nixa and work out on the same day with Chris Gomez on the same field. The difference was pretty apparent. And I think Babs would tell you that. Jackson Cantwell is a can't miss. The things he was doing that day for a sophomore to be at his size and at his age were phenomenal. Babs, it was still mentally, he was still growing, right? He's a basketball player or basketball first guy that only just transitioned to football, a year and a half ago. So the game was still a little fast for him last fall, and you could see him processing a little bit. This senior season for us is huge for Babs in watching and hoping that the game slows down for him, because like you said, there were moments and there were glimpses when you could see him kind of like go through the process rapidly enough and just toss guys and just do all the things that you expect him to do. Once the game slows down for him, and it could be this season, he's a guy that could be elevated on this list.
For those of you who don't know, Jackson Cantwell, the consensus number 1 player in the state of Missouri for the 2026 class. The other interesting thing about Andrew Babalola, Ryan, he's not committed just yet. So he's going to make somebody really happy here, possibly within the next month or two. We're going to continue our talk about the best players here in just a minute, but first, let's have a conversation. One of the best things about recruiting in high school football is the discussion in the community that can bring. If you have any questions or comments, text them over to us at the KCSN Mint Mobile Hotline We'll read them. We may just talk about them on the show. So what do you have to lose? Shoot us a message over at 913-407-6542. As our producer, Nick Springer, always says, there is nothing easier than a text. So what do you have to lose? We also want to tell you about our friends over at Home Field Apparel. Kickoff is almost here, and Home Field can get you geared up during Can't Miss Kickoff 2024, a month-long event that can get you outfitted with gear for your favorite school. Try out the football box, where you can get some never-before-seen items exclusive to your school. From short-sleeve shirts for the start of the season to long-sleeve shirts and hoodies for when the weather makes its inevitable Midwestern turn toward winter. Head to homefieldapparel.com and use the promo code linked below in the description, and you can get 15% off your first order. We'll be right back.
We appreciate you supporting KC Sports Network by listening to our podcast. You have helped us become the highest-ranked Chiefs podcast network in 2022 and 2023. And don't forget about our daily Substack newsletter, the best written analysis you can find on the Chiefs straight to your inbox every day. kcsn.substack.com.
With big cell phone providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were going to pay magically skyrockets. But with Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, they mean it. So you can say bye-bye to overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at just $15 a month. And better yet, all plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. And if you're worried about keeping your own phone and your phone number, with Mint Mobile, you can keep your phone and your phone number and all of your existing contacts. So ditch overpriced wireless to the Mint Mobile's deal and get 3 months of premium wireless service for just $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/KCSNVC. That's mintmobile.com/KCSNVC. Cut your wireless bill to just $15 a month at mintmobile.com/KCSNVC. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
We're back with the Verbal Commitment podcast, sponsored by Home Field Apparel, and continuing our look at the top local prospects in this 2025 cycle. We've given you 1 through 3. Ryan, number 4 is a guy who just recently switched his school alliances. Isaiah Mosey, Lee Summit North, headed to Nebraska. What are your thoughts on Isaiah?
Well, I mean, you look at the list and, you know, there could be a gripe of why isn't Isaiah Mosey a little bit higher? But, you know, in terms of offensive playmakers, he is the number one guy in the Metro for us. He's a guy that I like the route running ability an awful lot. Consistent hands when we've seen him, and I've seen him 2 or 3 times in person. I think the thing for me will be watching his speed and watching kind of how he handles the target on his back. He started to get a little bit of that notoriety, I think, last season. But Lee Summit North, just with all the guys that they've had over the years, has helped grow that. How he handles kind of being the torchbearer this season will be interesting for me, especially knowing that, you know, his father is not the coach at Lee Summit North anymore. He's actually now at Nebraska, had been at UCF. Now he's at Nebraska, where Isaiah will rejoin him in a year. So that'll be interesting for me to watch. I like Isaiah a lot, Kevin. It's just a matter for me of, you know, what kind of downfield speed can he present? How does he get open? How easily can he get open against the top guys, not just in the Metro, but kind of at a collegiate level? And then getting his body ready. I think right now he's listed around 185. It seems like when I've seen him play, and as it is natural through the course of a season, he looks a little bit thinner than that. But getting his body able to withstand the rigors of Big Ten football will be huge too.
Yeah, I think he's going to be really good. He's a guy that checks every box. It's just the extent to which he checks every box, right? Like he's an outside wide receiver, but he's 6'1", he's not 6'4". He's a guy that runs well, I feel like, but he's not a 4.3 guy, you know? Right. So he's a B+ to an A- in kind of every category, does it all really well. He's a playmaker at the high school level. He can change games with what he does, but like you were saying, you know, there are some things that, if he gets stronger, if he continues to get faster, he could check those boxes to an even bigger extent and kind of take that next step forward. Number 5, we have our first local commitment, I believe, of the list in Brock Heath of Blue Valley Northwest. We talked about his teammate on one side of that offensive line in Andrew Babalola earlier. Brock Heath, Ryan, may be the better lineman right now in terms of, hey, when Blue Valley Northwest, lines up to play on Friday night, and you say, okay, which guy is the better offensive tackle this season? It might be Brock Heath. He's a really good player.
A technician, man. And the other thing that I love about watching Brock Heath is he's a guy that doesn't want to leave the field and typically hasn't over the course of his career. That might change this year. We'll see. But because he goes both ways for Blue Valley Northwest, he'll play defensive line and offensive line. I think he's a guy that could play some center at the next level, could play either guard spot, and his growth plates are still open, Kevin. So there's the potential that offensive tackle could be in his future, maybe at Kansas State. They're leaving that door open, but a Jekyll and Hyde type, right, Kevin? I mean, like the nicest kid in the world, wouldn't hurt a fly, high student in terms of the academic world. I mean, he takes that stuff very seriously. And then Friday night comes around and he's got the black eye paint just like caked on his face, and he's ready to kill a human. I mean, he is a nasty guy when you get in the trenches with him. He wants to be the first guy to put his hands on you and just bury you into the ground 6 feet under. And I love that about him. But at the same time, Kevin, he does that the right way. And I mean the right way, fundamentally the right way. Such a clean prospect when you talk about the things in footwork and hands that you want to see from a lineman.
Yeah, he's not super long, and usually when you see offensive tackles, you see, longer arms and things like that. But he makes up for it on the other side with both the technical side, and he's a really good athlete, Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you add those two things together, the arms aren't nearly as big of a factor with that. Number 6 is a guy we've talked about on the show already, in Juju Marks. Recently switched schools. Ryan, what do you think about the Kansas Jayhawks pledge who's headed to Olathe South now after spending the last couple of years in Aquinas?
One of the more intriguing stories in the Metro, I think.
Yeah.
Storylines to watch, right, is he leaves Aquinas. He goes to Olathe South, which is more in his ballpark in terms of where he lives anyway. This wasn't one of those like, I'm going to jump to said school because I like said school or whatever. I mean, he's kind of back in his neck of the woods, so to speak, right? Olathe South's a program that has kind of been on the up and up with Jordan Allen, Bryce Normberg, and now it'll be Juju Marks. I wonder, and I'm very curious to watch, if the new scenery is a breath of fresh air that Juju needs, because you can't teach his size, you can't teach his length, you can't teach some of his athleticism, and maybe things just got stale at Aquinas for him. I don't know. We're going to find out this fall. If everything clicks, Kevin, we've talked about this. He's probably one of the guys outside the top 5, certainly just overall on our top 10 list, that could shoot up the board if he wants to put it all together. And that's the question that everybody wants to see answered.
We've talked about this comparison, and they don't play the same position, but Dominique Orange was a guy that as a sophomore earned offers from across the country. And then, things didn't go quite as well. He wound up choosing between, some smaller schools, went to Iowa State. Iowa State tapped into that potential, and now he looks like an all Big 12 nose tackle. With Juju, it'll be interesting because he was a guy that had all of those offers and everything at a similar point. Things maybe died down a little bit from the recruiting standpoint. If the Kansas coaches can tap into that, he's a good athlete for that size. You got the 6'10", 6'11" wingspan. All of those things are there. If Juju can tap into that potential, then he's got a chance to be a pretty good offensive tackle, and Kansas could get a steal there. Speaking of steals, though, Ryan, at number 7, we have a Kansas State commit, R.J. Collins of Staley, just pure raw speed. That's not all he brings, Ryan, but that's certainly the headliner.
Yeah, I mean, if Mosey is the most talented playmaker in Kansas City, R.J. Collins is going to challenge that right away. And the thing that I think RJ brings in it, again, maybe Isaiah could do it, we just haven't seen him do it, is the ability to play both ways. And obviously that's where he's going to be at the college level, is on the defensive side of the ball. Sounds like they want to work him in kind of in a nickel sort of situation for Kansas State that will allow him, because Kevin, he's very aggressive for a guy that is as fast as he is at the skill position. You would think that he's out there kind of swaggy, just in coverage. That's all I do. I don't want to hit anybody. I don't want to, get my arm sleeves dirty or anything like that. That is not RJ Collins, right?
Yeah.
RJ Collins will have blood, sweat, tears, and mud all over his jersey by the time the game is done, whatever he's got to do to make a play on the ball. And, he's an interesting guy, and the bottom of this list could shift any number of ways. And I think with him, the thing that we want to see, in terms of maybe if he wants to slide up any higher, is he's obviously shorter in stature, but we want to see kind of what we saw from Jacob Parrish, right? Is we knew Jacob Parrish was a little undersized, but we knew he had a lot of the other tools. Let's see those tools come together, and let's see how he embraces, again, kind of having that target on his back. Jacob did that and then some as a senior for Olathe North. Yeah. RJ can do that. RJ can put himself in Simone Award watch type stuff with his stats on both sides of the ball. Let's see him deliver that as a senior, and that'll be what we're looking for this fall.
Number 8's a guy that both of us love. When I was down in Texas, people used to say, hey, when Utah comes into Texas for a kid, you sit up and you watch, because those guys evaluate just incredibly well. Now they come into Kansas City for Drew Clemens, the tight end out of Oak Park. Ryan, Utah coming into Kansas City. Utah is not usually a major player in this region, but they picked a kid that I think is pretty darn good in Drew Clemens.
Yeah, coach's son, too, at Oak Park. So, he's a guy that has grown up around football. And you would imagine leadership skills are probably pretty natural for a guy like Drew. You and I were kind of messaging as we were compiling our list here, because, again, it's a little different than what you're going to see in the recruiting industry. And I remember texting you this week saying we might have done Drew Clemens a disservice. Like, we probably should have been talking about him a lot earlier than August 15th, right? So a guy that I think they list him at 6'4", but when you watch him on tape, he plays bigger than 6'4", 215 pounds. He's 18 right now in the Show Me State on the 24/7 composite. And again, I feel like that might be something that when we're re-looking and revisiting rankings come signing day, he's a guy that to me feels like has all the makings of going up the list. And you talked about Utah, right? They want their tight ends to be incredibly balanced in both as a pass catcher and in run blocking. Look at Dalton Kincaid. So if they're coming into a place that they rarely come into and snatching a guy like Drew Clemens, I think it's a testament to what they see in Oak Park. And again, a guy at Oak Park that's probably going to have a lot of film. If they play the way they did last year, he's going to be playing deep into November. And I think that there's going to be a lot of examples of, man, we probably should have gotten in on that guy. And it wouldn't surprise me, Kevin, in the least, to see some local schools maybe try and say, are you sure you want to go all the way out to Utah? But, it sounds like he's pretty content there for now.
Yeah, and both Kansas and Kansas State have pretty good tight end commitments in this class, too, when you're talking about Lincoln Cure headed to Kansas State. Desan Brame, another great tight end, in the region down at Derby, and so this has been a pretty good cycle for local tight ends for sure. A guy we know so well because we've seen him so often. And yet, Ryan, he's a guy that I think we're seeing with a little bit of a different lens after seeing him at Mill Valley 7-on-7, seeing the way that he changed his body. At number 9, McGuire Richmond, Blue Valley, also headed to Kansas State.
Yeah, we've talked about him, at length in that episode of just how different he looks healthy. The weight is there, good weight, right? The bulk, he still looks like a linebacker, but was incredibly fluid, playing that kind of safety role, which I don't think he's going to play in the fall, but for 7-on-7 purposes, to challenge himself, right? Because everybody knows what McGuire can do between the tackles and run support. But he wanted to challenge himself in coverage and go against the best, and that's what he did. And I was really, really impressed with him. I think, again, this is a top 10 list in terms of like college prospects, right? But if we're just talking about pure high school football players and guys that you just love tuning in and watching on Friday night, McGuire Richmond would be, top 3, right? Because he's a punter. He's a tight end. He's a linebacker. I mean, there's nothing that McGuire Richmond doesn't do. You go to a Blue Valley game, Kevin, you will hear his name on the loudspeaker a ton. And we're now seeing that that's warranted from a college recruiting standpoint as well. I think, again, a good get for Kansas State that I think a lot of people are going to shake their head and regret.
One of those guys that when you see him play, if he's playing a road game, the opposing PA guy is kind of sighing by the end of the game, like, oh, there's McGuire Richmond again, on another tackle. Number 10 is a dude that we both love the potential on. Charlie Wolleben of DeSoto has a great frame, Ryan, terrific testing numbers, really good athlete. Iowa State, I think, just flat out stole a kid out of Kansas in this one.
Yeah, and I mean, I know you're going to touch on some of the guys that were just outside the top 10. I think ultimately one of the big reasons why we landed on Charlie to finish off our top 10 is, he has great length too, but like you said, the testing numbers, the measurements validate what you expect to see from, an edge with his potential. A guy that, when you talk about testing, and again, maybe folks outside the recruiting industry aren't as familiar, right? But I know K-State fans are aware, even though he's not there anymore. Charlie Wolleben, testing-wise, compares very similarly to a guy like Nate Matlack. And Nate Matlack, a couple of years ago, was considered a big-time get in the Metro, and a guy that was attracting. I remember UCLA was kind of calling Nate Matlack, and TCU was in on Nate Matlack. So, I mean, Charlie Wolleben tests at that kind of level. Again, we like the testing. We think that he's got to the mindset of just putting your head down and working. And so I think that he's a guy that fits Matt Campbell's program to a T. It'll take him a little bit to kind of get there physically and adjust. But I think once he settles in, there was just too much to not have him in our top 10.
Great evaluation, I think, by Iowa State there. When you watch him play at DeSoto, he plays a role that helps DeSoto defensively, but doesn't necessarily play to his strengths as much, as if he were at a high school where he were playing, say, like a wide 9 where he could just go out and be a better athlete and run around offensive tackles. And so, like I said, I think a really great evaluation by Iowa State, and they've come into this area, both Kansas and Kansas City, and evaluated it pretty well and wound up with guys that have really helped their program. Some guys who kind of just missed the cut, Ryan. Kamori Moore at Lee Summit North, headed to Oklahoma. He's a guy that I think is a little sawed off for a defensive tackle. Has some nice things that he does on tape. When it's right, it's right. The way he can swim through it and make a play, he's got some suddenness to him and all of those things. I just think that, for a guy of his height, body type, etc., you'd like to see a little bit more explosion, to you kind of nail that down. Tate Nagy at Blue Valley North, headed to Kansas, is a guy that's undersized. He's a high school quarterback. Really quick, though. And when I had a chance to see him at KU camp, really separated from defenders, I think with him, it's just a question of we haven't seen him play wide receiver that much. We haven't seen him play his college role. And so there's going to be some things that he needs to do in terms of continuing to fill out physically. But also, we'd like to see him, kind of more in those situations. And he throws the ball a lot at Blue Valley North. And so it's not necessarily, when you say he's a quarterback, he's not necessarily a quarterback that's just back there a quarterback because he's the best athlete and he's running all over the place. If he does run a lot this year, that'll maybe give us a little bit better picture for the athleticism and the different things that we would want to evaluate. River Peppers at Fort Osage, we both love the speed. The frame as a running back needs to continue to fill out. But again, another guy that could be pretty good at Iowa State, might be good at another position if it comes to that. And then Gabe Fields, a guy that I know you like at St. Joseph, headed to Vanderbilt, is kind of the opposite of River Pepper. Filled out, physically developed, but maybe doesn't have that just absolute extra gear that River Peppers does at this point. From a sleeper standpoint, on the show and previous episodes, if you haven't watched, we brought up players like Tevin Gassaway from Olathe West, Trevor Garlington, Blue Valley Northwest, Braven Powell, Gardner Edgerton, and Sam Neeson, St. James on different episodes. So let's leave those guys out, Ryan, since we've talked about them before. Leaving them out, who's maybe a sleeper guy that you have your eye on heading into the season?
Well, I think it's interesting that, on our top 10 list, we've got a lot of Kansans there because I don't want to say a rare occurrence, but I do think kind of the top echelon guys in this class do seem to reside in Kansas. But I also think when you started rattling off the guys that were outside the top 10, Missouri's fairly deep. There's some guys that maybe aren't top 10 or top 5, but they're going to have some guys that I think are destined to play big-time roles in college, and that's where I'm going. I'm going on the Missouri side for mine, a guy that I cannot sing the praises of enough. And again, when you play on the reigning Class 6 champions, it is I can't believe that I'm calling this kid a sleeper. He was a first-team All-State selection last year, Kevin. Modi Williams Jr., he goes by Modi Williams at Liberty North. Let me run through some vitals here, right? 6'2", probably about 265, 270, right? 500 plus multiple reps at the squat, 315 hang and bench multiple reps, 4'9", 140, and he's a two-time state wrestling champion in the Show Me State at 285 pounds.
And for those who don't know, state of Missouri wrestling is outstanding.
Yeah. I mean, so I also like to say that not only because, okay, you've got a wrestler that's also a lineman, which we both, two thumbs up there, but it also shows that even if he's playing, late in the year, closer to 270, I think it goes to show that he can very much handle the weight all the way up to 285. If he needed to, cut weight or anything, he's still coming in right below 285. I think it goes to show his strength. Kevin, he came to the first, I think it was the offensive line, defensive line elite camp at Kansas State this summer. You've heard me talk about that. It's a camp that not only Kansas State, not only do they scout very well for it, but it attracts some good linemen because Connor Riley has a reputation for developing good offensive linemen. And if you're a D lineman, you want to go to that camp to show out against those linemen. Modi Williams shows up, was top 2, top 3 at the camp on the defensive side of the ball. He comes back to a second camp. I believe it was either late July or late June, a couple weeks later, and he does the same thing again. And I'm thinking there's no way he gets out of Manhattan without an offer. He's still sitting without an offer. I think, Mo West, he's got some MIAA interest. I think Kentucky actually pulled the trigger on him after his sophomore season. I don't know if that's a committable offer. I don't know if they're still pursuing him. But I know he's more offensive line at Liberty North. The things that I watched him do as a defensive tackle, Kevin, if that were his primary position, I think we will be talking about him as the best defensive lineman in the Metro. He would be, I debated putting him in, making a push for him in our top 10, period. I'm that high on Modi Williams. And if you don't believe me, go out and watch the tape. What I was able to see him do was tremendous at the K-State camp. And I think he's probably the biggest sleeper on the Missouri side.
Yeah, I'm going to tap a defensive lineman as well. I think a lot of times in our industry, it pays to tap genetics. When somebody is really good, their brother's been really good, their parents have been really good, whatever else. I'm going to go with Adeyeye Adebare over at North Kansas City. He's committed to Penn right now, going to Ivy League, 6'2", 265 pounds. If the name sounds familiar, his brother Tommy blew up
Yeah.
the scouting combine coming out of Northwestern. He went there. He was, I think, 6'2", 282 pounds, and ran 4.49. He's now with the Indianapolis Colts. Yeye isn't as athletic, is my understanding, but is stronger than his brother was. He's a guy, I like him on tape, Ryan. I think the tools are there, and kind of an interesting thing to watch. I think we see on the basketball side, these guys finish up their careers at Ivy League schools, and then they have an extra year of eligibility if they manage to not spend it. If he winds up having that extra year, graduating from Penn and having an extra year to play somewhere, he could be somebody that pops out on the other end of that thing with both an Ivy League degree and maybe somebody saying, hey, come here and make your run at the NFL. He's currently ranked, I think, by 24/7 Sports, the number 39 player in Missouri. This is a really strong year for St. Louis in Missouri.
Yes.
We're talking about the depth of the Missouri class. On the Kansas City side, a lot of the top players in Missouri are on the St. Louis side this year. But I do think that when you look at Yeye, he's a guy that has a chance to really develop and be one of those guys that people ask afterwards, why wasn't this guy more offered? How did he wind up there? And that certainly happened with his brother when they said, how did a 280-pound guy running 4.49 wind up at Northwestern? But it happened. Ryan, anything else you'd like to add at all?
No, I think we nailed it all the way across the board, and I think hopefully we've shine the spotlight a little bit brighter on those two final guys. And again, like you said, Kevin, if anybody's got a problem with the rankings, we now have a text line. So we'd love to hear from you guys. If there's anybody we missed, if there's other players out there, up and comers in the speaking mainly about 2025 class, so seniors to be this fall. We'd love to know if there's anybody kind of off our radar that needs to be on our radar. Give us a shout there, 913-407-6524.
Also, I'll go ahead and put in the comments producer Nick Springer's cell phone, his Instagram account, his Twitter, so that you can hit him up personally and let him know what you think as well. But that'll wrap it up. So thanks so much for all of you for watching and listening to the Verbal Commitment Podcast here on KCSN. If you like what you've seen or heard, leave us a like, subscribe, hit us with the 5-star ranking. If you don't like it, hit us up on that Mint Mobile hotline. And until next time, take care.